The stars looked different from the bridge of the horizon's edge. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the viewport, watching the endless darkness between systems. His crew worked quietly behind him, checking sensors and navigation data. They were 3 weeks into a routine patrol, and nothing interesting had happened yet. Lisa Grant sat at the navigation console, her fingers dancing across the controls. She was young for her position, but Jake trusted her completely. Next to her, Peter Hayes monitored the tactical station. He was older, a veteran who had served on military ships before joining exploration duty. Nicole Burns handled engineering from her station, keeping the ship running smoothly. Kevin Stone, their medical officer, was somewhere below in the medical bay. Jake liked his crew. They were good people, skilled at their jobs, and they got along well. Life on an exploration vessel could be boring, but it beat working in the crowded inner systems. "Captain, I'm picking up something," Lisa said suddenly. Her voice carried a note of concern that made Jake turn around. "What is it?" he asked, walking toward her station. "A distress signal." "It's faint, but it's there." She worked the controls, trying to clean up the signal. "The language is unknown. The computer is trying to translate." Peter leaned forward at his console. "Could be a trap. Pirates sometimes use fake distress signals." Jake nodded. "Keep our shields ready." "Lisa, how far away is it?" 2 hours at standard speed. "The signal is coming from a moon orbiting the gas giant in this system." The computer beeped. Lisa's eyes went wide. "Captain, the translation algorithm found one word it recognizes. Velkari. 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 Velkari." The bridge went silent. Everyone knew that name. Every human knew that name. 200 years ago, Earth was dying. The population had grown too large. Resources were running out. And wars over food and water had become common. Humanity was facing extinction. Then the Velkari arrived. They were insectoid beings, with 4 arms and chitinous shells that gleamed in the light. They looked nothing like humans, but they were kind. The Velkari shared their technology. They taught humans how to terraform Mars and the moons of Jupiter. They gave humanity agricultural techniques that could feed billions. They asked for nothing in return. When human leaders offered payment, trade agreements, or military alliances, the Velkari refused everything. They said that kindness was its own reward, and they hoped humanity would someday help another species in need. Then the Velkari left. They went back to their home among the stars, and humanity rebuilt itself. The species survived, thrived, and eventually reached the stars themselves. But humans never forgot who saved them. "Change course," Jake said quietly. "Maximum speed. Battle stations." The crew moved instantly. The horizon's edge was an exploration ship, but like all human vessels, it carried weapons. The ship turned and accelerated toward the moon. 2 hours felt like 2 days. When they finally arrived, Jake felt his stomach turn. The space around the moon was filled with debris. He could see the twisted remains of ships. Dozens of them. They were Velkari transports, civilian vessels with no weapons. Something had destroyed them all. "Scanning for survivors," Peter said, his voice tight. "I'm getting one life sign. Very weak. It's on the moon's surface." "Nicole, can we land?" Jake asked. "The moon has a thin atmosphere, but we can make it. Landing in 5 minutes." The ship descended through the thin air. The surface was gray and lifeless, covered in craters and rocks. Among the rocks, they found a crashed escape pod. It was Velkari design, barely held together. Jake, Peter, and Kevin suited up and went outside. They found the survivor inside the pod. The Velkari was badly injured, parts of its shell cracked and bleeding the purple fluid that served as their blood. Kevin immediately began treating the wounds, while Jake and Peter carefully moved the alien to their ship. Back on the horizon's edge, Kevin worked for 6 hours straight. Nicole helped him, holding equipment and monitoring vital signs. Finally, Kevin stepped back. Exhausted, but satisfied. He's going to live, Kevin said. The Velkari woke up 2 days later. Through the translation computer, he told them his name was Zitharan. His voice was weak, but his gratitude was clear. "Thank you for saving me," Zitharan said. "I did not think anyone would come." "What happened here?" Jake asked gently. Zitharan was quiet for a long moment. Then he began to speak, and the story he told made Jake's blood run cold. The Velkari homeworld had been invaded. An empire called the Krellian Dominion had attacked without warning. The Krellians were conquerors who believed that peaceful species existed only to be exploited. They wanted Velkari technology and Velkari territory. The Velkari, true to their nature, refused to fight back. They believed all life was precious, even their enemies. So the Velkari scattered. They loaded their families onto transport ships and fled into the galaxy, hoping to preserve their culture and people. But the Krellians hunted them. Every refugee ship was tracked down and destroyed. The Krellians wanted total genocide. They wanted no Velkari left alive to reclaim their worlds. The transport group Zitharan traveled with had been found 3 days ago. The Krellian warships appeared without warning and opened fire. There was no chance to surrender, no chance to run. Within minutes, every ship was destroyed. Zitharan only survived because his escape pod was thrown clear of the explosion. When Zitharan finished speaking, Jake stood up. He walked to the communication console and opened a direct channel to Earth Command. The message he sent was simple and clear. The species that saved humanity was being hunted to extinction. They needed help. The response came back within hours. Jake read it 3 times to make sure he understood correctly. The message contained only 3 words. But those 3 words would change everything. "We remember. Mobilize." Jake looked at his crew. Lisa was crying quietly. Peter's jaw was set in determination. Nicole and Kevin both nodded when they met his eyes. The Velkari had saved humanity when they needed it most. Now humanity would return the favor. And the galaxy was about to learn what happened when humans decided to repay a debt. The Galactic Council chamber was a massive structure, floating in neutral space. Inside, representatives from dozens of species gathered to discuss trade, territory disputes, and peace agreements. The Council had existed for thousands of years, maintaining a fragile balance between the various civilizations that shared the galaxy. Ambassador Chloe Parker stood before them now, representing humanity. She was a small woman by human standards, but she carried herself with confidence. Behind her, a holographic display showed the destruction of the Velkari refugee ships and the current location of Krellian forces. "The Velkari are being systematically exterminated," Chloe said, her voice clear and strong. "We are requesting permission for human military forces to transit through Council space to reach Velkari territory. We intend to stop this genocide." Velkari. "We intend to stop this genocide." Counselor Drex of the Thalarian Collective made a sound that the translator rendered as laughter. He was a large reptilian being, covered in blue scales that reflected the chamber's lights. His species had been part of the Council for 3,000 years. "Ambassador Parker," Drex said, his tone condescending, "we appreciate your concern for the Velkari. They are a gentle people, and their fate is unfortunate. However, the Krellian Dominion is a military power with over 500 warships. The Velkari themselves had defensive forces, and they could not stop the Krellians. What makes you think your species can make a difference?" Other council members made sounds of agreement. Humans were known across the galaxy as traders and explorers. Their ships were common in the trade lanes, carrying goods between systems. They were friendly, curious, and generally harmless. The idea of humans as warriors seemed absurd. Chloe smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "Counselor Drex, you know us as merchants and explorers. That is what we wanted you to see. But humanity has another face, one we hoped we would never need to show. She pressed a button on her control device. The holographic display changed. Now, it showed human space, but not the trading stations and colonies that the council members were familiar with. Instead, the display revealed shipyards, massive structures hidden in asteroid belts and behind gas giants. And ships, thousands of ships. The council chamber erupted in shock and confusion. Species that had thought they knew humanity began demanding answers. For 200 years, Chloe said, her voice cutting through the noise, humanity has prepared for war. We remember what it was like to be helpless, to face extinction with no way to defend ourselves. The Valkyrie saved us then. We swore we would never be helpless again. We built this fleet to defend ourselves and honor our debts. Drex stared at the display. This is impossible. Our intelligence services would have detected this. We are very good at hiding things we want hidden, Chloe replied. Now, counselors, we are asking politely for permission to transit your space. With or without your permission, we are going to Valkyrie territory. We would prefer to maintain good relations with the council. The council went into emergency session. They argued for 6 hours. Finally, they gave their answer. Humanity could transit council space, but only because the council did not want to risk conflict with this suddenly revealed military power. Chloe thanked them and left immediately. She sent one word back to Earth. Approved. General Marcus Webb stood in the command center on Earth, surrounded by displays showing every human military ship in existence. He was an older man, his hair gray and his face lined with the weight of command. He had been planning for this day for 30 years. Begin mobilization, he ordered. Across human space, 30 battle fleets emerged from hiding. Ships that had been disguised as mining stations powered up their weapons. Crews that had trained in secret for years boarded their vessels. The largest military mobilization in human history was underway. Admiral Linda Chase commanded the dreadnought, Retribution's Dawn, the largest warship humanity had ever built. She stood on the bridge, watching her fleet assemble around her. 200 ships, from massive carriers to fast destroyers, all bearing the mark of Earth. All ships report ready, her tactical officer reported. Linda nodded. Set course for Valkyrie space. But we're not going directly there. First, we're sending a message. The human fleet's first target was a Krellian supply depot on the edge of disputed territory. The depot was heavily defended, with 15 Krellian warships on patrol. The Krellians had conquered dozens of worlds over the centuries. They were confident in their military superiority. That confidence lasted exactly 3 minutes after the human fleet arrived. The Battle of Depot 7 became legendary across the galaxy. Human ships moved with precision and coordination that shocked the Krellian commanders. Their weapons were designed specifically to counter Krellian shields and armor. Human fighters swarmed the Krellian ships like angry insects, overwhelming their defenses. The battle lasted 17 minutes. When it was over, the depot was destroyed. All 15 Krellian warships were reduced to debris. The human fleet had lost 0 ships. Admiral Chase opened a channel on all Krellian military frequencies. Her message was brief and clear. This is Admiral Linda Chase of the human fleet. The Valkyrie are under our protection. Release all Valkyrie prisoners. Withdraw from all Valkyrie territory. You have 1 week to comply. If you refuse, we will destroy your empire. This is your only warning. She cut the transmission and turned to her crew. Now we wait and see if they're smart enough to listen. The Krellian response came 3 days later. They destroyed another Valkyrie refugee ship, broadcasting the execution of the survivors across all channels. Their message to humanity was simple. We do not fear you. Linda Chase watched the broadcast. Her expression did not change, but everyone on the bridge could feel the cold fury radiating from her. All fleets, she said quietly, execute Operation Retribution. Show them what it means to make humanity angry. Across the galaxy, Human ships moved toward Krellian space. The real war had begun, and the Krellian Dominion was about to learn the most important lesson in the galaxy. Never threaten those that humans care about. The Krellian Dominion had been conquering worlds for 500 years. They knew how to wage war. They used overwhelming force, massive fleets, and brutal tactics to crush any resistance. They had defeated every enemy they ever faced, but they had never fought humans before. Commander Ryan Foster crouched in the darkness of the Krellian command station, his team spread out around him. They had infiltrated the station 4 hours ago, using a stealth ship called Silent Arrow. The mission was supposed to be reconnaissance only. Gather intelligence and leave quietly. But when Ryan saw what the Krellians were doing to their Velkari prisoners, the mission changed. "Team, we're not leaving anyone behind," Ryan whispered into his communicator. "Prepare for combat extraction." His second-in-command, Sergeant Claire Newton, nodded from her position. She had been with Ryan for 8 years, and she trusted his judgment completely. The rest of the team moved into position without question. The Krellians never knew what hit them. Human soldiers moved through the station like ghosts, their training and equipment making them nearly invisible. When they did strike, it was fast and precise. Ryan's team freed 37 Velkari prisoners and eliminated the entire Krellian command staff in less than 20 minutes. As they escaped on the Silent Arrow, Ryan transmitted all the data they had gathered to Captain Heather Stone, the chief of human military intelligence. What she found in that data changed everything. Heather sat in her office on Earth, analyzing the Krellian command codes and supply routes. She was younger than most intelligence chiefs, but her mind worked like a computer. Within 12 hours, she had mapped the entire Krellian military infrastructure. "General Webb," she said over a secure channel, "I can see their whole operation. Their supply lines are overextended. They're relying on captured resources from conquered worlds. If we hit these 17 locations simultaneously, we can cut off 60% of their fleet from resupply." Marcus Webb looked at the targets she had identified. He smiled grimly. "Make it happen." The human fleet split into smaller task forces, each assigned to a specific target. They struck simultaneously across 20 different systems. The Krellians had never faced an enemy that could coordinate attacks across such vast distances. Commander Greg Palmer led a fighter wing in an attack on a Krellian shipyard. His squadron of 30 fighters faced over 100 Krellian defenders. But the humans had better training and better tactics. Greg had been flying combat simulations since he was 16 years old. Every human pilot had. They moved like they were reading each other's minds, covering each other perfectly. The shipyard burned, and Greg's squadron escaped with only 2 wounded pilots. Captain Beth Morgan commanded a battle group that intercepted a Krellian reinforcement fleet. The Krellians outnumbered her 3-1. But Beth used human advantages in speed and maneuverability to pick apart the enemy formation. Her ships danced around the slower Krellian vessels, hitting them from unexpected angles and retreating before the enemy could respond. The Krellians tried to adapt, but human warfare was unlike anything they had encountered. Humans studied history, learning from thousands of years of conflict on their own world. They understood strategy in a way that species who only fought primitive enemies could not comprehend. Then the Krellians made a terrible mistake. They decided to target human civilians, believing fear would force humanity to negotiate. A Krellian squadron found a human colony transport traveling through neutral space. The ship carried 3,000 colonists, including families with children. The Krellians destroyed the ship slowly, making sure to broadcast the entire attack. When it was over, they sent a message to Earth, demanding that human forces withdraw from Velkari space. The response came from Admiral Linda Chase herself, broadcast on every channel in the galaxy. "You have made a grave miscalculation," Linda said, her voice cold as ice. "You believed we would fear losses. You were wrong. Every human death strengthens our resolve. Every atrocity justifies our cause. We will not withdraw. We will not negotiate. We will not stop until every Velkari is free, and your empire lies in ruins. The human offensive intensified. General Webb unleashed tactics the galaxy had never seen. Human ships began targeting Krellian infrastructure with ruthless efficiency. They destroyed shipyards, supply depots, command centers, and communication relays. They did not attack civilian populations, but they showed no mercy to military targets. Lieutenant Sam Porter led an engineering team that developed new weapons specifically designed to counter Krellian technology. Within weeks, human ships carried missiles that could penetrate Krellian shields and energy weapons that could cut through their armor like paper. On the medical ships, Dr. Amanda Cole worked around the clock. She treated human casualties, but she also saved Velkari prisoners that human forces liberated from Krellian camps. Amanda had taken an oath to save lives, and she kept that oath regardless of species. Her medical teams established field hospitals in liberated systems, showing that humanity could wage war without losing their compassion. The Krellians tried everything they could think of. They attempted ambushes, but human intelligence always seemed to know where they would be. They tried scorched earth tactics, destroying resources before humans could capture them, but humans simply brought their own supplies. They tried to form alliances with other species, but no one wanted to side with an empire that was clearly losing. 3 months after the war began, the Krellian Dominion had lost 40% of its military capacity. Their fleets were scattered and demoralized. Their supply lines were in chaos. Their commanders were terrified of engaging human forces. In the command center on Earth, General Marcus Webb looked at the strategic display. The path to Velkari Prime was clear. The time had come for the final push. All fleets, converge on Velkari Prime, he ordered. We're going to finish this. Admiral Linda Chase received the order aboard Retribution's Dawn. She looked at her assembled fleet, the largest human battle group ever created. Behind her, hundreds of ships waited for her command. Set course for Velkari Prime, she said. Maximum speed. We're bringing the Velkari home. The fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel, heading toward the Velkari homeworld. The liberation was about to begin. And the Krellians were about to face the full fury of an enemy they should never have provoked. Velkari Prime hung in space like a blue and green jewel, beautiful and peaceful, but surrounding it was a ring of death. 200 Krellian warships orbited the planet in a defensive sphere. Their weapons pointed outward. The Krellian Supreme Commander, Vex Thor, stood on the bridge of his flagship, confident that his position was unbreakable. Let the humans come, Vex Thor said to his officers. They will break themselves against our defenses, and if they try to attack, we will execute every Velkari civilian on the surface. The humans are weak. They care too much about innocent lives. That weakness will destroy them. Admiral Linda Chase studied the tactical display showing the Krellian formation. Her fleet was larger and more powerful, but a direct assault would cost thousands of lives. Worse, the Krellians had already announced they would massacre the Velkari civilians if attacked. It was a hostage situation on a planetary scale. We need a different approach, Linda said to her senior staff. Get me Lieutenant Colonel Danny Price. Danny Price was an engineer, not a warrior, but his mind was brilliant. He listened to Linda's problem and thought for exactly 30 seconds before nodding. I can build quantum communication jammers, Danny said. If we place them around the system, we can cut off Krellian coordination. They won't be able to communicate between ships or with the surface. Each ship will be isolated. How long? Linda asked. 72 hours if I have the resources and personnel I need. You have everything you need. Make it happen. While Danny and his engineering battalion worked on the jammers, Commander Valerie Ross piloted a stealth reconnaissance mission through the Krellian defensive line. Her ship was so small and so quiet that Krellian sensors could not detect it. Valerie mapped every Krellian ship position, every weapon emplacement, every weakness in their formation. The data went to Nathan Hughes, a tactical officer with a gift for seeing patterns. Nathan analyzed Valerie's reconnaissance data for 18 hours straight. drinking coffee and barely sleeping. Finally, he found what he was looking for. "Here," Nathan said, pointing to a section of the Krellian formation. "These 12 ships are positioned to cover each other, but there's a timing gap in their sensor sweeps. If we attack at exactly the right moment, we can punch through before they can respond." Linda looked at the plan. It was risky, but it could work. "Coordinate with all department heads. We execute in 60 hours. The plan unfolded in carefully timed stages. First, Captain Oliver Grant and his cyber warfare team infiltrated the Krellian military network. Oliver was barely 25 years old, but he could make computers do things that seemed like magic. His team planted viruses and false data throughout the Krellian system, creating chaos in their command structure. Krellian officers suddenly received conflicting orders. Their sensors showed human ships that did not exist, their communication channels filled with garbage data. Vex Thor screamed at his subordinates to fix the problems, but Oliver's attacks were too sophisticated. The Krellian network collapsed into confusion. Then Danny Price activated his quantum jammers. Suddenly, Krellian ships could not communicate with each other at all. Each vessel was alone, cut off from the rest of the fleet. Vex Thor tried to send orders to his ships, but his messages went nowhere. At exactly that moment, Major Stephanie Clark opened fire with her long-range artillery platforms. The human weapons had been positioning themselves for days, moving slowly and quietly into optimal firing positions. Now they unleashed a devastating bombardment. But not randomly. Every shot was calculated to hit only military targets, avoiding any chance of civilian casualties on the surface. Krellian orbital defense stations exploded. Military installations on the planet's surface were reduced to rubble. Through it all, not a single civilian building was touched. The precision was terrifying. Vex Thor watched his defenses crumble and realized he had badly underestimated his enemy. "All ships, engage the humans," he ordered, but his orders could not reach anyone. Each Krellian ship had to decide on its own what to do. That was when Colonel Alan Foster and his Marines made their move. 12 human assault ships punched through the confused Krellian formation and dove toward the planet's surface. They landed at 12 different locations, all sites where Velkari civilians were being held by Krellian occupation forces. The Marines moved with practiced efficiency. They had trained for urban combat for years, learning how to fight in cities without causing unnecessary destruction. Each team secured their landing zone and began evacuating Velkari civilians to waiting human medical ships. Sergeant Melissa Hart led her squad through a Velkari city where Krellian forces were preparing to bomb a civilian shelter. Melissa was fast and fearless. Her squad eliminated the Krellian soldiers before they could carry out the massacre, saving over 300 Velkari families. The Krellians fought back desperately. They launched counterattacks against the human beachheads, throwing everything they had at the Marine positions. Humans and Krellians died by the hundreds in the streets and buildings of Velkari cities. Tyler Ross, a human medic, worked in a field hospital near one of the landing zones. He treated wounded Marines as they were brought in, saving lives with skill and determination. But Tyler did something that shocked the Velkari who watched. He also treated wounded Krellian soldiers, giving them the same care he gave his own people. "Why do you help them?" a Velkari asked. "They are your enemies." Tyler looked up from his work, his hands covered in purple and red blood. "Because I'm a medic. I save lives. All lives." The battle for Velkari Prime lasted 19 days. The fighting was some of the most intense of the entire war. Human forces lost 8,000 dead and 20,000 wounded, but they achieved their objective. The Krellian fleet was shattered. The Krellian occupation forces on the surface were defeated or in retreat. Velkari Prime was free. When the last Krellian ship fled the system, something amazing happened. Velkari civilians emerged from shelters and hiding places across the planet. They saw human soldiers standing guard, protecting them. They saw human medics treating the wounded. They saw human engineers already working to repair damaged buildings. Zitharan, The Velkari that Jake Morrison had rescued months ago stood on the steps of the Velkari Capitol building. Around him gathered thousands of his people. Human ships filled the sky above, but they were not conquerors. They were guardians. Zitharan activated a communication device that broadcast his words to the entire human fleet. His voice trembled with emotion. 200 years ago, we gave you the tools to survive. We asked for nothing in return. Today, you have given us something far greater. You have shown the galaxy that debts of kindness are never forgotten, and that compassion is not weakness. You have proven that the innocent will always find protectors among humanity. You have our eternal gratitude. Admiral Linda Chase stood on the bridge of Retribution's dawn, looking at the planet below. Around her crew was exhausted but proud. They had lost friends and comrades in the battle, but they had saved an entire species. Linda opened a channel in response to Zitharan. The debt is repaid, but our friendship has only just begun. The war was over. The Krellian Dominion still existed, but it was broken. Half its territory had declared independence. Its military was scattered and demoralized. The mighty empire that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries was now just another struggling power, humbled and defeated. But the real shockwaves were just beginning to spread across the galaxy. The Galactic Council reconvened in emergency session. The chamber, that had once looked down on humanity, now felt very different. Ambassador Chloe Parker walked to the speaker's platform, and this time, every counselor watched her with wary respect. Counselor Drex of the Thalarian Collective stood to address her. His voice lacked the condescension it had carried before. Now there was something else in his tone. Fear. Ambassador Parker, Drex said carefully, the Council congratulates humanity on its victory. The liberation of the Velkari is a noble achievement. However, we must now address the balance of power in the galaxy. Your military fleet is the largest and most advanced force in known space. Many council members are concerned about what humanity intends to do with such power. Chloe looked at him steadily. Counselor, I understand your concern. Let me be clear about our intentions. We built our fleet to defend ourselves and honor our debts. We have proven we will use it to protect the innocent. We have no interest in conquest or domination. Another counselor, a floating gas being named Thelux, spoke up. Then you will dismantle your fleet? Return to your previous status as a peaceful trading species? Chloe shook her head. No, we will keep our fleet. We will remain ready to defend ourselves and our friends. The question you should be asking is not whether humanity is a threat, but whether you will be our friends or simply bystanders when the next crisis emerges. The council chamber erupted in argument. Some species, particularly the Velkari, argued passionately for full human membership in the council and formal alliance. Others, especially those with histories of expansion and conquest, demanded restrictions on human military power. The debate raged for days, but while the politicians argued, something else was happening across the galaxy. Intelligence reports began flooding in to Captain Heather Stone's office on Earth. She read them with growing concern before requesting an urgent meeting with General Marcus Webb. Sir, we have a problem, Heather said, spreading holographic displays across the general's desk. 14 major powers are rapidly militarizing. They're using our victory over the Krellians as justification for military expansion. Some want to ally with us. Others are preparing to challenge us. We've triggered an arms race. Marcus studied the reports grimly. We knew this might happen. We revealed our strength to save the Velkari. Now everyone knows what we're capable of. It's more than that, sir. Some species see us as potential protectors. They're sending requests for defense agreements. Others see us as a threat that needs to be eliminated before we get stronger. We've changed the entire power dynamic of the galaxy. Marcus called a meeting of his senior commanders. Admiral Linda Chase arrived from Velkari space, where she was overseeing the reconstruction efforts. Colonel Ryan Foster came from the border regions. Major Stephanie Clark joined via secure communication from her artillery command ship. They gathered in the war room, looking at the same intelligence reports that troubled Heather. "We saved the Valkyrie," Linda said quietly. "That was the right thing to do. But we've made ourselves the center of attention. Every species in the galaxy is now reassessing their military position based on what we can do." Ryan nodded. "Some will want our protection. They'll see us as the new guarantors of peace. Others will see us as the next would-be empire, and will try to stop us before we can expand. We didn't build this military to conquer anyone," Stephanie added. "We built it to ensure we're never helpless again. But that doesn't matter. What matters is how others perceive our intentions." Marcus looked at each of them. "So we have a choice. We can try to hide our strength again, pretend to be less than we are, or we can stand openly as what we've become and prove through our actions that we can be trusted." "We can't hide anymore," Linda said firmly. "The galaxy knows what we are. If we try to pretend otherwise, it will look like deception. We need to prove we're different from the Krellians and the other empires. We need to show that power and honor can coexist." The decision was made. Humanity would not hide its strength, but neither would it use that strength for conquest. They would become something the galaxy had rarely seen. A powerful species that chose to be a protector rather than a predator. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of Horizon's Edge, back on patrol duty in the frontier regions. Navigator Lisa Grant sat at her station, but her displays now showed different information than before. They were no longer just explorers. They were guardians, watching for threats and protecting the weak. "Mission parameters have changed," Lisa observed. Jake nodded. "Everything has changed. We saved one Valkyrie survivor. And look what it started. Do you regret it?" Lisa asked. "Not for a second. Zeeth Aran is alive. The Valkyrie are free. That's what matters. Far across the galaxy, in a location known to very few, the true powers of the galaxy held a secret meeting. These were not the counselors who debated openly. These were the species who controlled events from the shadows, the ancient civilizations who had shaped galactic politics for millennia. They watched holographic footage of human ships patrolling former Krellian territory. They studied reports of human military capabilities. They analyzed every aspect of this new player on the galactic stage. "The humans call it repaying a debt," one shadow leader said, its form hidden in darkness. "But what they have truly done is announce themselves as a force that cannot be ignored or intimidated. They are sentimental, emotional, and utterly unpredictable by our standards. They wage war with precision, but show mercy to the defeated," another added. "They risked thousands of lives to save a species that offered them nothing in return except ancient kindness. Such behavior is irrational by any strategic calculation, and yet effective," a third voice interjected. "The Valkyrie now worship them. Other peaceful species are requesting their protection. The humans have gained enormous soft power through this single act of apparent sentiment. The question," the first shadow leader said, "is whether we learn to live with them or try to eliminate the threat while we still can." Silence filled the hidden chamber as the shadow powers considered their options. Humanity had revealed itself to be far more dangerous than anyone had suspected, but also far more noble. They were a paradox. Powerful but not cruel. Advanced but not arrogant. The meeting ended without a decision. The shadow powers would watch and wait, trying to understand these strange beings who valued honor over advantage and friendship over empire. Back on Earth, in a quiet office overlooking the rebuilt cities, General Marcus Webb looked at images of Valkyrie children playing in streets that had been battlefields just weeks ago. Human soldiers stood guard nearby, protecting them. It was a simple scene, but it represented everything humanity had fought for. "We've changed the galaxy," his aide said softly. "Yes," Marcus agreed. "The question is whether we've changed it for the better or simply traded one set of problems for another. Time will tell, sir. Marcus nodded. Outside his window, he could see construction ships building new defense platforms at the edge of Earth's solar system. Humanity would never be unprepared again. They had proven their strength to the galaxy. The Velkari were free. The debt was repaid. But the consequences of that choice would echo through the centuries to come. Humanity had stepped onto the galactic stage not as conquerors or merchants, but as something the galaxy had rarely seen. Protectors willing to sacrifice everything for those who once showed them kindness. And across the galaxy, in council chambers and war rooms, on trade ships and military vessels, every species asked the same question. What will the humans do next? The answer would shape the future of the galaxy itself.